I'm Santanu Dutta. I'm currently a researcher at the Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education in India and alumnus of the department IDC. Today I would be speaking um, on certain reflections on the experiments in Bengali film titles. I choose particularly the period between 1930s till the appearance of Satyajit Ray as one of the very prominent figures who has made his definitive mark in graphic design, particularly connected to the writing of the film titles and of his own films. I demarcate this period, which kind of starts off from 1955 with his landmark film Pothe Panchali, for which he which he also designed the titles. However, he also has certain works which even predate that. I start particularly pick up my period of analysis from 1930s. Just to delineate the fact that there hasn't been sufficient notable documentations in the archive which can facilitate some research work on that, because the resources are kind of sparse and not much is available for comparison and analysis. And Satyajit Ray obviously is a definite departure from the aesthetic that preceded him. A very pertinent question in this is why do we kind of pick up the aspect of film titles, and when the broader theme of this entire event is experimental typography, and what do we mean by experiments per se? I would be addressing these questions. Firstly, I think it's very pertinent to understand what were the definitive trends of this demarcated era, and then I kind of contextualize what I mean by experiments per se. So if you look into this, the available resources on the poster art, the film posters, the lobby cards, handbooks, booklets, advertisements, that is all of the film related paraphernalia that exists, we would kind of get a sense of the dominant trends of this particular era. And I would first take you through a brief journey through those. Sorry. What we normally see happening in most of the film related paraphernalia is what we find that we would find a regular usage of a regular body text typeface for promotional material. So there wouldn't be a separate lettering that would be made specific to the film that is being sent out for promotion. Out here, I kind of put forth two of the pages that I got from the booklets. One coming from Chitrapot, which is one of the prominent film promotional magazines coming from Bollywood. That's film industry based out in Bombay. The other one is from the publicity booklet for a Bengali film which has its roots in Tollywood, the film industry based out of Kolkata, which is the hub of the Bengali film industry. One would kind of get a sense that this is one distinct facet of it. The other facet is one which I present out here, is probably in an attempt to kind of bring diversity. The designers for the publicity materials would probably be making film titles in number of formats, in number of styles, which are probably do not give a very cohesive sense of what the film is about, or we cannot probably ascertain certain experimental qualities to that lettering practice. And the other ones which are there are in relation to the use of generic block type, thick stroke monolinear mastheads. Out here I present around 6 such titles from the Bengali film posters. It's a very distinct use of monolinear Bengali typeface without a modulation, which one would normally find in the red pen usage structure of a Bengali letter form. The other one is the use of what I call the Art Deco style, which is taking the prominent Art Deco typefaces that were there, and then try to adapt them in the Bengali script, Bengali script grammar. The resultant is is probably what can be called experimental, because it is simply an act of adaptation rather than a very unique act of contextualizing certain typographical grammar and sensibilities into the current context or the vernacular context that they were trying to play in. And then I arrive at the question of what is meant by experiments, and what I define is kind of captured in the words of in a seminal work by Peter Willack, who in his essay Experimental Typography, whatever that means, narrates that the various conceptions held by typographers involved in experimentations are in relation to test and prove ideas or phenomena. However, that is a notion that is kind of borrowed from sciences, the act of testing your ideas out in the lab in a very safe environment where you can probably do calibrations of your ideas and then try things out. However, situating graphic art as a commercial venture would not allow you those sufficient soft corners to play at, because when it's out in the open at the public, it's out there and you cannot really come back and do those modulations yet again. So what I mean by this is what I would like to define by experiment is how far is the design from the normative practices of that age, and also how it confronts and questions the prerequisite structures of what is considered to be a good typographic design. So though there might be, it's also pertinent to make this point as well, that though there might be certain typographic norms which are globally accepted, however, when we talk about this vernacular designs in, say, non-Latin cultures, it would be rather more pertinent to say that sufficient norms are not in place, and hence the global typographic culture might not have sufficient effects on the workings of the commercial outputs. Also, hence I look into the shift from contemporary works and the predecessors, which I showed in the earlier few slides. Also, trying to break the general rules of typography to achieve an idea, as in it cannot simply be an act of remolding the structures of the letter form. It has to go beyond remolding the structures in order to attain a certain function which probably the film wants to put forth. So with this formulation, I kind of pick up a few 6 or 7 notable works which I think we can look into seriousness because of the attempts that they make in trying to put forth a different or some sort of going beyond what is the normative practice. Firstly, I look into this incredible act of typography put forth in one of the films that came in 1936. Its name is Torubala. People who are familiar with the Bengali script would probably identify very significant departures of the structure, which is the semicircular curves of the letter Tha reimagined in straight line edges, triangular structure of Ra imagined in circular shape, half circular curves of Law imagined as straight-edged steps, the nukta or the bindu and the side-bearing joiner, both imagined as a solid triangle, 2 thick parallel lines imagined along the strokes of the stress, which are fairly interesting experiments that are done. Following which, we go to this 2 other examples, one from a film in 1937, which is named Kochi Shongshod, and the other one from a film in 1949 named Cartoon, in which we kind of find that they have reconfigured the identity of the letters to deploy a certain mood of humor. In this case, in Kochi Shongshod, the letters are modeled either in rectangular or sections of a circular form, similar to treatments of prominent Art Deco typefaces like Asser Neuer and Before. The regular shapes have been imagined as half, full, or parts of a circle, blending with rectangular strokes. In the second one, the typeface for cartoon, the design of the image of the object of publicity is ingrained in the physicality of the lettering, as in this, the incorporation of the circular shape in the title, and it contributes to the physiognomy of the entire composition of the poster itself. In a certain way, the designers of this film titles have tried to play on the humor that is there in the film itself and try to incorporate on the structure of the lettering pattern of the masthead itself. Next, we move on to another very interesting work which came out in 1940. It's a film titled Obhinetri, which means the actress. It kind of imagines the dichotomous life of a heroine fraught with the spotlight of focus and darkness, and with the title oriented vertically, with a strip of red carpet rolling along the length. So the metaphors are very obvious, and the highlighted part on the body of the letters are illuminated in white, while the rest is in dark or black. So it kind of plays onto on the dual life, a life which kind of caters to the personality of a charismatic actor and the turmoils of personal and public life. The framing spatially integrates the visual rhythm of 4 glyph units arranged in squares, with the strip leading as if a visual scan path leading from one glyph unit to the other. This is the era in which we kind of find films in dealing with mythical characters, and it would be hard not to find a film which dealt with one of the prominent characters in Mahabharata, the Bhishma. As we know, Bhishma is someone who has his upright, morally persistent prince, family man, and a warrior, and within the microcosm of the epic of Mahabharata, and its many strands and characters, Bhishma is one of the towering figures. And what we see in this title art is somewhat, the name is somewhat embedded in an invisible circle, akin to a dot, as an auspicious mark on the forehead, a seal or a stamp of authority, or the sun as a halo. The strokes are slender, without superfluous ornamentations. They're bold, without a hint of frailty. So this motif kind of provides for a rich textual significance through the sensory qualities of the pictorial elements, which attain a very deep organic unity. So this was also the time when nationalism and the fight for the freedom struggle was going on, and we find a film in 1951 which comes up 4 years after the independence, which remembers a struggle in the year 1942. The film is titled 42, and it imagines just the sparse 2 numerals in Bengali, the Bengali numerals of 4 and 2, and the story is set in the backdrop of the Quit India movement and highlights atrocities suffered and the struggles by the Indians. The material body of the letters itself are kind of drowned in a smoke of. It's smoky. The bodies are unclear. It's an overlapping envelope of black and red, which kind of looks at the despair, darkness, and the mayhem. Whereas though the national and the linguistic areas of struggle probably do not coincide, because the movement was on a national level, and this film kind of caters only to a particular struggle faced by a hamlet in Bengal. However, it kind of the visual motive that it caters to kind of reignites the passion plays of independence, and it kind of hints to the finer emotions of sensibility and the collective philosophical belief that Indians kind of had at this moment. The final one in this entire collection is probably this one. It's a film that came in 1937. As I mentioned earlier, that we also do find films in which multiple type letterings have been done for the film title, and they all appear in the film booklets. However, this one particularly is very interesting because it plays on what its plotline kind of caters to, which is rich with drama and intriguing premise. So what we find out here, there's a figurine who emits the name of the film, and it emerges out of the trumpet that she is holding to, and the letters kind of attain some sort of a material body in which they reshape into the title of the film, and there's almost a transformation of the oral into a visual verbal representation. The second instance is the one which appears in the verso page of the booklet. It appears in some sort of a folk handwriting with continuous conjoined letters. And the third one is which is is in strict geometrical shapes, where many conventions of the script has been modified. So in a sense, what we see out here are three very distinct and sharply different instances of the same lettering, and probably the chronological period in which it comes up, with no instances of such diversity of typefaces coming up in the film paraphernalia at this point of time. I have few other instances of interesting typefaces that have came up. The one which we see out here are from three films, one from 1940, one from 51, and another from 52. They all kind of hint at the transformation of the type as a metaphorical word image of the theme. So almost there is a sense of kinesthetic experience of the turmoil of events. In the first case, it's a tension of separation. In the second, it's an horror. The third is a sweeping storm, which is embodied in some dynamic three-dimensional nature of the letters, which are one of the earliest instances of doing this kind of experimentations in Bengali film titles. The other one is where a films portray a certain particular ethnic or racial community, and attempts have been made to kind of trying to visually match the type with the script, and then instantiating a certain feel or authenticity of that place. I leave with these questions and certain implications that I kind of draw from this study. So though I try to present an inexhaustive set of titles which enact specific nuances of typographic innovation, however, what I feel is important is the fact that when a student of typography kind of does this study, or tries to look into the archives and try to understand what interesting facets that he or she can draw, implications that he or she can draw for his own education, I think it has got extreme epistemic values for a novice typographer, because at once he is able to understand and appreciate the bygone modes of production of typefaces, which is a very important knowledge that a typeface designer or a typographer should have. Also, he or she is able to understand what were the conventions historically, and then probably try things out different from those conventions, and hence leading to much better and newer forms of experiments. Also, while doing this study, the kind of the experiences which I had was one related to the lack of historical data. There's lack of probably the archives and the documentation. So this might well be an interesting act, because if we are in the pursuit of understanding what the visual cultures of the bygone times have been, we would probably be able to move forward to preserve them, and then probably try to understand and analyze them, so that they gives us certain motives and certain directions, so that we can further understand and expand the indigenous visual design culture and the vernacular culture as well. Okay, thanks.